It's 2021. Can you still get a good bottle of wine for under $10? And what is it we're tasting for when we get that tiny little pour from a server when we first order a bottle of wine? The answers to those coming up next. Hello and welcome to another episode of Wine This Week with Scott Leek. In this week's episode, we are talking about yet another varietal from Bordeaux, Carménère. Carménère is virtually absent from Bordeaux today due to an outbreak of phylloxera in the 1860s. Now, phylloxera sounds like that might be a band that opened for Tool that one time, or maybe it sounds like something you got diagnosed with on that spring break trip to Panama City and doctor had to prescribe penicillin for it. Phylloxera is actually a tiny insect about 1/30th of an inch long, so it's super tiny, but it nearly decimated wine varietals across the globe at some point in time. About 6 million acres of vines were destroyed by this tiny little thing eating at the roots. Before the outbreak happened in Bordeaux, they happened to transport some of the varietals of Cabernet, Merlot, Carménère to Chile. Now, interesting thing about what happened in Chile, though, is that because the leaves look so much like the leaves of Merlot, they didn't actually know they had Carménère. And so for the longest time, people were drinking Merlot from Chile when it was actually Carménère. They did some DNA testing in the 1990s and found out, whoops, some of these Merlot grapes are actually Carménère. So it happened because they look very, very similar leaves, very similar styles. The only major difference is that this buds a little bit later, it's a little bit later ripening and does well in some very Indian summers. So Chile in the Central Valley actually happens to be one of the most perfect places for growing Carménère. And in fact, it is one of the only places left growing Carménère. About 75% of it grown across the world is found here. You can still find it in a couple other places, but Chile is where we're most likely going to find it. And I've got a couple different bottles from Chile here that we'll taste one of these shortly here today. Today's Carménère comes from famed producer Concha y Toro, which is Spanish for Concha and Toro. Within this company, there is a brand, Casillero del Diabalo. This is pretty easy to find. Concha y Toro is one of the 10 largest wine producing companies in the world, making 33 million barrels a year. So yeah, you should be able to find this if you want it. Casillero del Diabalo, kind of a funny story behind the name. The founder, who created the company in 1883, had some problems with thieves stealing his wine. So he made up this rumor that the devil himself was guarding the cellar. So thieves didn't attack it anymore, but not sure what it was like getting uneducated 19th century Chileans to go and work in that cellar after that. He managed to do okay for himself, so it all worked out. The wine we're drinking today cost me less than $10, and Carménère can actually be found for some really good prices. $15 to $20 will get you a really good Carménère, and there are some spectacular ones in the $40 to $80 range. One of them is called Purple Angel. Here's a picture of it. If you ever see this on a menu and it looks like it's a good price, give it a shot. That is typically a 98 and 99 point wine. So Carménère can be really amazing. We'll see how good it tastes at $10. Wine Spectator rated this last year 88 points and put it in their issue of the top 100 value wines of the year. So I'm excited to give this a try. I've seen this wine all the time and I've never actually tried it. So let's give it a shot. Really pretty color. I can see the lines on my paper a little bit. I would call this kind of a medium color. Really nice ruby. This is just looks like just some dark cherry liquid. It's awesome. Love it. I don't know if you can tell. I'll try to get it right up against my pale face for a backdrop for you guys. Ooh, fun. There's definitely some, man, there's a lot going on for a $10 wine. This is a great start. I've got dark black cherries, raspberry, some like freshly roasted coffee, not brewed, but roasted coffee. Maybe there's something herbaceous in here. Eucalyptus maybe? This is nice. I'm really pleasantly surprised so far. Yeah, the coffee's coming through a little bit more, maybe even some mocha. Man, I'm excited to taste this. Let's give it a shot. dry wine. Tannins are medium high. Acid level's pretty high as well. I'm going to call it medium high on the acid. Alcohol's not too bad. I'm going to go medium on the alcohol. And the body, medium bodied. I expect it to be a little bit, maybe a little bit heavier than this. I'm going to try this one more time. I think Chile is known for using some pretty toasted barrels when they use oak barrels. That's coming through. I'm getting some toasted. I think that roasted coffee smell was the toasted oak. The fruit flavors are there, but the finish on this is pretty quick. The fruit dies pretty quickly. It's nice, but it just dies pretty quickly. I'm getting a little bit of that raspberry, a little bit of the black cherry. I mean, the fruit's pronounced. I'm just kind of having a hard time pinpointing it because I'm getting this, the tannins are still a little rough on my tongue. I'm getting kind of the cedar finish again. I think the oak in this kind of went over the top, but it's not the typical kind of that buttery vanilla-y oak. It's not bad. I'm gonna give this a 30-minute pause and come back to it and see how different it tastes in a little bit. It's been 30 minutes. Let's see if this has evolved at all. Color's the same. Can't say I'm terribly shocked by that. Color's not really gonna change in 30 minutes. I really do love the nose on this. I'd pay $9 just to smell this wine. It's a nice clean smell. I get these great red, kind of some red fruits, a little bit of black, but I'd say more of that black cherry raspberry smell. I'm getting pepper on the nose, and that coffee is really there, and there's some toast. Like someone just overdid their toast just a little bit. Still good, you're not gonna scrape it off, but you didn't burn it. So you know what that makes me think of? Someone got up in the morning, made some coffee, and while they're making the coffee, made some toast and put some raspberry jam on it. So there you go. If that sounds good to you, you might want to give this wine a try. A little bit of chocolate, a little bit of that black pepper spice. It's really nice. All right, let's taste, see how that evolved. I just definitely got something different this time. First of all, I enjoyed the palate more this time too. I'm not going to change anything in terms of the structure. It's dry, medium plus tannins, medium plus acidity, medium body. I'm going to go medium minus on the finish. But doing a little retronasal breathing, I had this hint of like a northern Syrah, which this kind of pepperiness, but more star anise, so just a little kind of licorice spice, more so than pepper. But what really came through was smoke, in a good way. Coffee not as much, maybe the toast not as much, but the smoke is really prevalent on the palate, and it's nice. Yeah, coffee on the nose, but smoke on the palate. So smoke, chocolate, raspberry, star anise. It's a nice bottle of wine for $9. Wow. I'm going to score this 6 out of 10 on my scale. Definitely above average. And from a quality to price ratio, this is pretty spectacular. For a food and wine pairing, that smoke element pushed me over the edge. I am totally going Kansas City barbecue with this. I think a nice smoky barbecue with that kind of that sweeter molasses and ketchup kind of base to the Kansas City sauces. I think that's going to pair well with this. And if you were to you could do a steak with this, but every once in a while you see on a menu one that's like coffee or espresso rubbed, whether that's ribs or a steak. I think that with the coffee I get on the nose would be a fun, parallel pairing. So yeah, the jamminess of this and the smokiness, just is screaming to me, pair this complimentary wise with Kansas City barbecue. All right, I know a lot of you are probably really mad at me for that cliffhanger I left you with last week with this 2-part tip of the week. So if you watched the episode last week on Cabernet, we talked about bottle and cork presentation at a restaurant. So you picked out your bottle, they brought it to you, they read to you Casillero del Diabalo, Carménère 2019, and you validated, yep, that's the producer, that's the grape, and that's the vintage that I ordered. You give them a little nod, they proceed to open it, they set the cork down next to you, and you know now to ignore it and don't do anything with it, and they pour you this little tasting. What they're asking you to do here, and I cannot overstate this, your job is to evaluate the health of this bottle of wine, not whether or not you like it. If you don't like oaky wines and you smell this, you're like, ooh, a lot of oak. You don't get to send it back because it's too oaky. That's not a flawed or damaged bottle of wine. Now, I'll admit there's been plenty of times I've had a bottle of wine that I just wasn't quite sure if, like, is it supposed to smell and taste like this? In that case, all you have to do is acknowledge that. Take a smell, take a sip, and say, you know, I don't know if this is how this wine's supposed to taste. Could you send over the sommelier or maybe a manager that can smell and taste this and tell me if they think it's okay? And they will absolutely do that. And they'll come back and say one of two things. Either, yeah, you know what, we think that wine's okay. Maybe we can decant it for you. Maybe we just need to let it breathe a little bit. It'll probably taste good with food, whatever. Go ahead and enjoy it with confidence at that point in time. But they might say, you know what, you're right. I'm glad you brought this to our attention. They don't want you to drink a crappy bottle of wine. They're going to get their money back for it as well. They'll send it back to the distributor. So they'll say, you know, that wine is flawed. Can we bring you another bottle of this same wine, or would you like to pick out another one? And totally up to you, whichever one of those you want to do. Chances are that damaged wine was isolated to that specific bottle. I would feel comfortable getting the same bottle a second time. They'll come back and you go through the same routine again. But what is it you're looking for? What are some things that can tip you off if a wine is actually legitimately flawed? There are some pretty telltale signs that are really obvious, and there's some other ones that are a little bit harder to detect. So some of the really obvious ones, the most common thing would be a corked bottle of wine. And it used to be that like 6 to 7% of all bottles of wine were allegedly corked. We're nowhere near that anymore. It's less than 1%. And in my personal experience, I haven't had even 1% of my bottles be corked. So you're looking for wet cardboard or wet dog smell and taste with a corked wine. Some of the other really obvious things you might smell and taste would be things like acetone, nail polish remover. You're looking for something that maybe smells like a Band-Aid, something that smells like canned asparagus if you're drinking a white wine. A horse blanket, horse manure, barnyard smells. That's kind of the tricky one. That might be a flawed wine. That could be actually how the wine's supposed to smell and taste in the case of Burgundy or some Rhone wine. So that's one where I would definitely, if it's off-putting to you, if you don't feel it's right, ask for some help on that. You also might be looking for something like old raisins. If the wine just smells rusty, tired, if it smells like one that maybe you left out on your counter at 70 degrees and didn't vacuum pump it, and you tried to drink it 3 days later, it just tastes tired, maybe a little too acidic. Well, you know what? That might be a wine that got oxidized or had heat damage. So go ahead and question that one as well. And I would especially look for that if you're ordering wine by the glass and they bring it to you and it feels old and tired and like it was sitting on the counter for 3 days, because wines by the glass at a certain restaurant, yeah, maybe they did leave it out on the counter for 3 days and didn't vacuum seal it. So go ahead and send that one back too, or at least ask to have someone else try it. So there you go. Those are some of the top things you're looking for in a flawed wine. Again, it's pretty rare. You don't need to worry about it too much, but do not hesitate to speak up if it just doesn't feel right. Thanks for watching another episode of Wine This Week. If you enjoyed the episode, please click on the like and subscribe buttons below and leave any comments you might have. I hope you are inspired to try the great value that can be had in Carménère wines. Speaking of great value, join me next week as we move to Spain for what is, in my opinion, one of the best values out there, particularly in the sparkling wine market, and that is Cava. Until then, Keep trying new wines, and as always, cheers. When we order a bottle of wine, oh, so close. With outbreaks in every single country across the world at some point in time, except for Chile and Argentina. Knock on wood. I didn't want to do that. People who are buying bottles of Merlot from Chile in the 70s and the 80s were most likely drinking Merlot. Damn it! No! They were most likely drinking Carménère. Ugh. Now, the reason for my stuttering right now, we're going to start this over in just a second. Almost. No idea what I was going to say. Not a clue. Said the word the. No idea what was going to happen after that. Why don't we try that again? Stop. Moving too much. And it's been 30 minutes. Let's see if things...